Warsaw, September 19, 1940. A German police unit conducts what they call a lepanka, a roundup. Random civilians are swept off the streets, forced into trucks at gunpoint, destined for labor camps or worse. Men run. They hide in doorways, leap through windows, scatter like frightened birds. The smart ones disappeared hours ago when the rumor of the raid first spread through the neighborhood. But one man doesn't run. Captain Witold Pilecki stands calmly in his mother-in-law's apartment on Wojska Polskiego Street as boots thunder up the stairs. He has false identity papers in his pocket, the name of a dead soldier, Tomasz Serafiński. He has no weapons. He carries no documents that would reveal his true identity as a resistance operative in the secret Polish army. He simply waits for the inevitable knock on the door. When the SS bursts in, Pilecki doesn't resist. He allows himself to be shoved against the wall, searched, arrested. He is loaded into a truck with roughly 2,000 other terrified Poles, packed so tightly they can barely breathe. The truck rumbles through Warsaw's streets toward an unknown destination. The mystery is this: why? Every other man in that truck is praying for escape, for mercy, for a miracle. Pilecki is praying he gets sent to the right place, to a new camp the Germans have established in southern Poland, a place called Auschwitz. His mission is insane by any rational measure. The Polish underground has received troubling reports, thousands of political prisoners disappearing into Auschwitz, families receiving terse telegrams announcing sudden deaths. Something is happening behind those gates, something the Nazis are working hard to conceal. The resistance needs intelligence. They need someone on the inside. Pilecki volunteered to be that someone. He thought it was a prison camp, perhaps harsh, perhaps brutal, but survivable. Gather intelligence, organize resistance, report back. A soldier's mission, dangerous but comprehensible. He had no idea he was walking into a death factory. No one did. Not yet. The cattle car journey took 3 days. 70 men crammed into a space meant for 40. No food, no water, a single bucket for waste. The air grew thick and toxic. Men fainted. Some died standing up, held vertical by the press of bodies. On September 22, 1940, the train lurched to a stop. The doors were wrenched open, and daylight flooded in, blinding after 3 days of darkness. SS guards screamed orders in German. Dogs snarled. Clubs fell on anyone who moved too slowly. Pilecki stumbled out with the others, blinking in the autumn sun, and saw the gates. Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. The iron letters mocked the truth of what lay beyond them. Pilecki was processed with brutal efficiency, stripped, shaved, beaten, tattooed. He became prisoner number 4859, no longer a name, just a number in the camp's ledger of the damned. The reality of Auschwitz revealed itself in savage increments. The camp was designed to destroy men, not quickly through execution, but slowly, methodically, through a calculated combination of starvation, exhausting labor, random violence, and psychological torture. The kapos, prisoner functionaries, many of them German criminals given power over other inmates, were often more vicious than the SS, wielding clubs and whips with sadistic enthusiasm. Pilecki observed everything. He was trained for intelligence work, and his mind became his most crucial weapon. He began memorizing data, the layout of the camp, the guard rotations, the routines of selection and punishment. He noted the death toll, initially dozens per day, but climbing steadily as winter approached and conditions deteriorated. He watched men give up, saw the moment when hope died in their eyes, and they became what the prisoners called Muselmänner, walking corpses, too broken to fight for survival. He also watched for the opposite, men who still had fire, who resisted in small ways, who might become allies. Within weeks, Pilecki made contact with other members of the Polish underground who had been swept into Auschwitz. Quietly, cautiously, they began building what would become Związek Organizacji Wojskowej, the Military Organization Union, or ZOW. It started with 5-person cells, each member knowing only the others in their immediate group, a structure designed to limit exposure if anyone was captured and tortured. Report extract, October 1940. The camp is a machine designed to break men. Food rations are calculated to produce slow starvation. Work details are assigned to break bodies through exhaustion. Punishments are public and grotesque. Men beaten to death for the slightest infractions, while the rest of us are forced to watch. I am estimating 20 to 30 deaths daily from natural causes, which are anything but natural. The Germans are perfecting methods of extermination that leave no bullet wounds, no overt murders, just exhaustion, disease, and despair. I am writing the war log in my mind, committing every detail to memory, because paper is impossible and discovery means death. Pilecki was already documenting the camp's horrors, preparing the report that would become one of the most important testimonies of Nazi atrocities. Over the following months, ZOW grew from a handful of conspirators into a network encompassing hundreds of prisoners across multiple barracks. The organization had clear objectives: boost morale among inmates, distribute extra food and medicine to members when possible, gather intelligence on camp operations, and, most ambitiously, prepared detachments of men who could take over the camp if a relief force attacked from outside. The network operated under constant threat. Discovery meant immediate execution, often preceded by torture designed to extract the names of other members. Yet the organization persisted, sustained by the desperate need to do something, to resist in whatever way possible, to maintain human dignity in a place designed to eradicate it. One of ZOW's most remarkable achievements was something that sounds impossible. They built a radio transmitter inside Auschwitz. Using parts smuggled in by inmates who worked in workshops or had contact with civilians outside the wire, the resistance assembled a functioning transmitter and concealed it in the camp hospital. Through this lifeline to the outside world, Pilecki sent regular reports to the Polish underground in Warsaw, which forwarded them to the government in exile in London and ultimately to Allied commanders. The messages were stark and urgent. Mass murder was occurring at Auschwitz on an industrial scale. By late 1941, the camp's nature had shifted dramatically. Originally designed to hold Polish political prisoners, Auschwitz was being transformed into something far more sinister. Soviet prisoners of war arrived and were subjected to experimental gassing with Zyklon B in the basement cells of Block 11. The experiments proved successful from the Nazi perspective. By mid-1942, the first Jewish transports were arriving, selections were being conducted on the ramp, and the gas chambers began operating at full capacity. Pilecki witnessed these developments with growing horror. This was no longer a prison camp. It had become the epicenter of genocide. His reports became increasingly desperate. Report extract summer 1942. They are murdering Jews by the thousands. Trainloads arrive daily. Those selected for immediate death are told they are going to shower. They are packed into sealed chambers and gassed. The bodies are burned in massive ovens that run day and night. The smoke is visible for miles. The smell of burning flesh permeates everything. This is not war. This is mechanized annihilation. We need help. We need the Allies to bomb the camp, the rail lines, anything to stop this. Even if it means killing us, the prisoners, please, we would welcome death if it stopped this murder machine. The messages reached London. Allied commanders received intelligence briefings detailing the systematic extermination of European Jewry. The reports from Pilecki, smuggled out at enormous risk, verified by multiple sources, provided some of the first concrete evidence of the Holocaust. And the Allies did nothing. The reports were filed away, dismissed as exaggerations, deemed unreliable. Some officials simply could not believe that such atrocities were possible. Surely the accounts were Polish propaganda designed to draw Allied resources eastward. Others acknowledged the reports might be true, but argued that the best way to stop the camps was to win the war as quickly as possible, that diverting bombers to strike Auschwitz would delay victory and ultimately cost more lives. For Pilecki, listening through the clandestine radio to BBC broadcasts that made no mention of Auschwitz, the silence was devastating. He was risking his life daily to document genocide, and the world either didn't believe him or didn't care. The tragedy of being right when the world refuses to listen became the defining burden of his mission. He had succeeded in infiltrating the camp, building a resistance network, and transmitting accurate intelligence about the greatest crime of the war. And it changed nothing. The trains kept arriving. The chimneys kept smoking. The murder continued unabated. By early 1943, after nearly 2.5 years inside Auschwitz, Pilecki faced a new threat. The SS was closing in on his network. Informants and torture had begun to crack the outer rings of Zoo. Several members had been arrested and executed. The radio transmitter had been dismantled and hidden after narrowly avoiding discovery. The SS security apparatus, led by men who specialized in detecting resistance, was tightening the noose. Pilecki made a decision. If his reports weren't believed from inside the camp, he would have to escape and deliver his testimony in person. Perhaps if he could speak directly to Polish resistance commanders, he could convince them to launch a rescue operation, an armed assault on Auschwitz to liberate the camp before more were murdered. The plan was audacious and nearly suicidal. Escaping from Auschwitz was considered impossible. The camp was surrounded by multiple fences, watchtowers, patrols, and dogs. Escapees who were caught, and most were, faced execution in front of the entire camp population as a warning. Furthermore, for every successful escape, the SS would execute 10 randomly selected prisoners from the escapees' barracks as collective punishment. But Pilecki had one advantage. He had been assigned to a work detail at the camp bakery, located near the outer perimeter. The bakery team occasionally made deliveries beyond the inner fence line. After months of observation, Pilecki identified a vulnerability in the routine. On the night of April 26-27, 1943, he and 2 other conspirators made their move. During a late-night shift, they cut the telephone lines to delay the alarm, overwhelmed the guard, and sprinted toward the Sola River that bordered the camp. Behind them, searchlights suddenly blazed to life. Sirens wailed out. Gunfire cracked through the darkness, bullets whipping past their heads as they ran through the forest. They ran for hours, expecting every moment to be their last. But luck, or perhaps divine providence, was with them. They evaded the initial pursuit, crossed the river, and made contact with a local Polish farmer who provided civilian clothes and directions. Within days, they had reached Warsaw and reconnected with the underground. Pilecki had survived. More importantly, the war log survived, not written on paper, but preserved perfectly in his memory. Every detail, every death toll, every atrocity witnessed over 947 days inside hell was ready to be transcribed. Back in Warsaw, Pilecki immediately began compiling his experiences into what became known as the Witold Report, a comprehensive 100-page document detailing the Auschwitz underground, camp operations, and the systematic genocide he had witnessed. It was one of the most important primary source documents of the Holocaust, delivered while the camps were still operating. He also made his case for a military assault on Auschwitz. With detailed knowledge of guard positions, routines, and weaknesses, Pilecki argued that a coordinated attack by Polish underground forces could potentially liberate the camp, or at least disrupt the killing operations. But the Home Army commanders faced brutal calculus. They lacked the resources for such an operation. The casualties would be catastrophic, and there was no guarantee of success. The assault never came. Pilecki watched the months pass, knowing that every day of delay meant thousands more murdered. His warnings, delivered at enormous personal cost, had once again failed to produce action. Pilecki continued his resistance work. He fought in the Warsaw Uprising of 1944, was captured by the Germans, and spent the final year of the war in prisoner-of-war camps. He survived Hitler. He survived the Nazis. He survived Auschwitz itself. But he could not survive the peace. When Soviet forces liberated Poland, they replaced one totalitarian regime with another. The communist government viewed members of the Home Army, loyal to the Polish government in exile rather than to Moscow, as enemies of the state. Pilecki, still committed to Polish independence, joined anti-communist intelligence networks and continued reporting on Soviet activities to the government in exile. On May 8, 1947, the Communist secret police arrested him. The charges were espionage, border violations, illegal weapons possession, and plotting to assassinate communist officials. He was tortured, coerced into signing a false confession, and subjected to a show trial where he was not permitted to present a defense or call witnesses. The man who voluntarily walked into Auschwitz, who built a resistance network under the noses of the SS, who documented genocide and risked everything to alert the world, this man was convicted by his own countrymen of being a traitor and Western spy. On May 25, 1948, in Mokotów prison in Warsaw, Witold Pilecki was executed with a bullet to the back of the head. His body was dumped in an unmarked mass grave. The location remains unknown to this day. His final words, recorded by the executioners, carried the dignity that had sustained him through Auschwitz and beyond. "I've been trying to live my life so that in the hour of my death I would rather feel joy than fear. For decades after his execution, Witold Pilecki ceased to exist in official Polish history. The communist regime scrubbed his name from records, destroyed documents, and prohibited any mention of his achievements. His report was buried in archives, classified and forgotten. School children learned nothing of the man who infiltrated Auschwitz. His family was warned never to speak his name. The erasure was so complete that when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 and communist censorship crumbled, many Poles were astonished to discover this ghost from history, a hero whose story had been deliberately deleted because his loyalty to free Poland threatened the Soviet narrative. Witold's report was finally published. Historians began piecing together his incredible story from scattered documents, survivor testimonies, and the fragments that had survived decades of suppression. Pilecki was posthumously rehabilitated, honored, and recognized as one of the most remarkable figures of World War II. Yet the core tragedy remains. Pilecki was right about everything. He accurately reported the genocide while it was happening, provided actionable intelligence, and urged intervention. And the world, whether through disbelief, bureaucratic indifference, or strategic calculation, chose not to act. By the time Allied forces liberated Auschwitz in January 1945, nearly 1.1 million people had been murdered there. Only 7,000 remained alive. How many could have been saved if Pilecki's reports had been believed? If the rail lines to Auschwitz had been bombed? If the gas chambers had been destroyed? The question haunts historians because it is unanswerable, a terrible calculus of lives lost due to inaction. Pilecki understood something profound about bearing witness, the importance of creating a record, even when that record might be ignored, suppressed, or destroyed. He knew that someday, perhaps long after his death, the truth would matter, that future generations would need to know what happened, who resisted, who tried to sound the alarm. This is the essence of the war log mission, preserving the testimonies that history tries to erase. Sometimes the most important logs are the ones that powerful forces want deleted, the accounts that challenge official narratives, that document inconvenient truths, that bear witness to atrocities when the world prefers not to listen. Pilecki's war log was sewn into memory when paper was impossible, transmitted through clandestine radios when communication meant death, compiled into reports that were buried for decades and finally resurrected when freedom returned to Poland. It is a testament to the enduring power of truth, truth that survives torture, execution, and systematic erasure because someone cared enough to risk everything to preserve it. Captain Witold Pilecki walked into Auschwitz knowing it might be a death sentence. He walked back out, carrying the most important testimony of his generation. He was executed for his loyalty to freedom. He was erased by those who feared his truth. And yet, here we are, decades later, telling his story. Proof that witness matters, that documentation matters, that the war logs of history cannot be silenced forever. What would you risk your life to write down? What truth would you preserve, knowing you might never live to see it acknowledged? Pilecki knew his answer. He lived it. He died for it. And his report survives. Help us keep these stories alive. Subscribe to the War Log, because the most dangerous logs are the ones someone tried to destroy.